Today we talk about bank collapses in America. Why is it happening? And will that have any effect on our banks and our money? Welcome to the Money Trade. Banks survive and thrive on just one mantra: make as much income as possible from the deposits it collects. Traditionally, for that they give loans. That's why interest on loans is always higher than interest on deposits. The difference is their profit. Later, banks went into more ways of making money, and one of them is investment in securities. In the same way some of us invest in shares and then trade it in share market, also investment in bonds, act as intermediaries in business deals, and so on. The American banks which had collapsed were doing the same. But the question is, why only some of them failed? Well, the list is not over. It's said that many more banks are waiting in the line. It may even spread beyond the US. So it's a larger issue, a systemic issue. Silicon Valley Bank, or known as SVB, was very popular among the startup companies in the US. They deposited their money reserves mostly in this bank. It increased more than threefold in just 3 years to hit $189 billion in 2021. What did they do with that money? To make a larger profit, they invested in long-term bonds. Bond is a contract for lending money. The money loaned will be compensated with annual interest, and the original money will be returned on the date agreed. The government and the private entities issue bonds. The maturity date in general is between 2 to 30 years, but mostly it's 10-year bonds which we see in the market. The fixed interest paid each year up to the maturity is known as coupon rates, also interest rates. If an investor buys a new 10-year bond of $1,000 at a coupon rate of 4%, he will get $40 for the next 10 years and get back the original $1,000 on the 10th year. He can also sell the bonds to others before the maturity date. Selling the bonds, but it's tricky. Governments and other entities keep on issuing bonds according to their needs. And the coupon rate or the interest rate varies each time. If the bank deposit rates generally in the country are higher than earlier, the next batch of bonds will also have higher coupon rates, say 5%. Suddenly, the earlier bond with 4% coupon rate is less attractive with the investors and won't get a good selling price, and its price crashes. This can happen in reverse also. When the interest rates on deposits go down in the country, newly issued bonds pay lower interest rates or coupon rates, making the existing bonds attractive and hence fetch more price if sold. Whoever holds these bonds make a lot of money. The Silicon Valley Bank, expecting lower interest rates in future, invested $80 billion in bonds. They could easily pay interest on depositors, and if some clients decided to withdraw their entire deposit, the bank could simply sell some bonds and pay for it. This was the logic. But soon, the entire plan tanked. Inflation started rising in the country. The Federal Reserve, which is equivalent to a Reserve Bank, raised the interest rate several times to contain the inflation. The Silicon Valley Bank management didn't see this coming. The bond market situation turned upside down. Coupon rates on new bonds issued started to rise. Why? Because the interest rates for deposits in the country is generally rising. And that made old bonds less attractive. The banks lost about $15 billion in value of the bonds. But they still could have kept the bonds with them and waited for a favorable movement to sell. But another blow was coming. In the high interest scenario, that means not only for deposits but also for loans, the startups were finding it hard to get finance. They turned to their cash reserves kept in the bank, and soon every startup company was withdrawing a substantial share of their deposits from the Silicon Valley Bank. The SVB struggled to pay them, and on March 8th this year, the bank announced selling off their entire bond portfolio. But even that was not enough. Then they tried to raise some capital. That also didn't work out. Meanwhile, each step created panic among depositors, and there was a bank run. The Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. the second largest fall in US history.
Collapse of Silicon Valley Bank is causing shockwaves across the entire business world.
With the FDIC now in control, customers can access up to $250,000 on Monday. But as ABC's Jacqueline Lee explains, that's not enough for many companies left struggling to manage their finances.
The panic spread to other banks also. Within days, Signature Bank, which is another regional bank, fell. A rescue plan was immediately floated with lots of dollars to save the bank. But many more regional banks are now feeling the heat. First Republic Bank, Western Alliance, Truist Financial Corp, Commercial, East West Bank Corp, all of their shares are crashing. The tremors of bank failures are felt even in Japan, where Topix Bank's shares tanked. It has worsened the crisis in Switzerland's Credit Suisse Bank. And now the million-dollar question, will it affect India? Many Indian startup companies too are exposed to Silicon Valley Bank, and the loss to them is expected to be around $1 billion. Now what about Indian banks? Banks in India traditionally do the deposit and loan business, but our banks do invest in shares and bonds and in other investment opportunities of late. There are no laws preventing them. Meanwhile, we have laws for keeping cash reserves to tide over contingencies for banks. It's designed by Reserve Bank of India from time to time. Other than that, they are free to make their own decisions. And Indian banks are slowly moving away from the role of mass banker, that is, take deposits and give loan to the public in a large scale. It is more into investments, it's more into making profit, and profit in a huge scale.
If you see the last 2-3 years of the balance sheets of banks, almost 30% of the deposit is being invested in these markets, including the securities. Purpose of nationalization was for collecting deposits, reaching the common man in the interiors, and providing loans, especially for the so-called priority sector, that is agriculture, allied agriculture, the small-scale industries, village artisans, and even the poorest of poor, who had to be given 1% of the total advances at 4% simple rate of interest. If you are going to invest the depositors' money in the securities market or bond market, then you are deviating from the goal which was given.
After the infamous 2008 bank crisis, the US has made stringent laws to avoid similar catastrophes. One was the Dodd-Frank Act, which placed many restrictions on risky business practices for the banks. But later, under the Trump administration, many banks were given exemptions. Silicon Valley Bank was one among them. And now they are in deep crisis.
Look, the bottom line is this. Americans can rest assured that our banking system is safe. Your deposits are safe. Let me also assure you, we will not stop at this. We'll do whatever is needed.
Meanwhile, in India, private banks are way ahead in maximizing their profit by investing in risky ventures and loans. Some even fail too, like the Yes Bank. Nationalized banks then are compared with them and shamed, all the while their services to the nation are forgotten.
Even today, if you see the government schemes, including the Mudra loan, who is giving it? It is mostly the public sector institutions which are given. The street vendors scheme, almost 97% is given only by the public sector bank. All the other Yojana, Atal Pension Yojana and all, it is only the public sector banks which are taking care of that. So keeping in that mind, the government should once for all put a end to this talk about privatization.
Profit seems to be the one and only motto for banks in the new world. For maximizing profit, banks move away from the people. They close down branches, minimize loans for the common man, and charge hefty fees for bank transactions. They are still inventing more and more restrictions to keep the people away. It's happening in India, it's happening in the US, it's happening everywhere. And people are trying to stall it as much as possible.
We want New York City to take our
In every country, movements are coming up and they are fighting because it's the money of the people. Well, that's all from us. Goodbye till we meet again.